here. So I'm Resident of Colwood. I'm finally arrived here, and with me is Dark Shadows Twitter. Scott, how are you, man?
Hi there. I'm doing well. Can't complain on my end. How are things going with your battles?
They're going. That's believe that. But we're here to discuss the Dark Shadows movie. So, when did you first see the movies? Like, what did you see in order?
Oh golly. So I had been watching this TV show through sci-fi for about a year and had gotten into 1840. And then somehow my mom found the VHSs for sale somewhere. So I watched them. That would have been I double checked this 2004 with her. So early 2004 is when I first saw them. One of those, it was a double feature tape, so I kind of watched them both
Oh,
back to back. So not as glamorous as some folks.
what did you think of House of Dark Shadows?
I mean, at that point, it was definitely I had heard a little bit about Barnabas started off as dark.
Right,
And so that was my I know this is supposed to be that original dark story, but not what the show did.
right.
Because I was reading the internet, I was spoiling everything for myself. That was just my thing, and for some folks that's not theirs. But um so it definitely was okay, this is dark, this is a lot of people that I know are alive in the show are just they're just gone. It was definitely okay, let's can't wait to get to that plot line and see how it goes where they don't all die, or if they do, I guess they're all coming back somehow. You never know with a show like Dark Shadows.
I really found this interesting because I actually saw these in exact order. I saw House, Night, and then obviously the 2012 film.
Yeah.
And House was really, I don't know, it was, I had seen it after the series. So this to me, and what I picked up right away was this is not canon to the series.
Yeah.
So, what are your thoughts about the movies never really being canon to the series?
I mean, I know I joke about it on my Twitter of the Dark Shadows multiverse. Marvel Comics have their own world. We have 17 different versions of Barnabas. Pick and choose. Do you want your brooding brunette? Maybe there's a blonde one out there. He's a vampire. He's not. He's a young, youthful man. He's a really old vampire. He's been dead and buried in Brazil for hundreds of years. Who knows? So
There,
I just thought of them in that way of okay, this is just another time band, and some very different decisions were made here. I mean, gosh, just look at the house. Clearly, these Collinses really struck it big.
they did. The Lyndhurst estate is where they're filming. I'm waiting for the chain smoking Barnabas Collins to show up. That's the other multiverse we haven't seen yet.
I don't know what, just him and Julia leaning over those candlesticks all the time,
Yeah,
lighting
yeah,
it up and
yeah.
puffing away.
Right. They won't have the lighters. They'll just use the candles.
It's just, I mean, the time she did it in the show, I'm just yes. Why is this not a GIF? Come on, youngins. I have no tech skills. Somebody out there find it.
I don't either. I don't know how to make them at all. If I did, I would make one. But
Yeah.
so they literally take the whole, well, most of the cast, and they
Mm-hmm.
bring them from the series to the movie. We're talking Jonathan Frid, John Carlin, Lewis Edmonds, there David, Joan Bennett, Matt, Catherine Lee Scott. I mean, Humphrey Allen.
Louis, David, the other David, Jerry Lacey pops up.
Yep.
Oh gosh. Paul Stoddard /
Yep.
Jason. He's a constable. Nicholas Blair all of a sudden becomes a doctor. Humbert Allen Nostredo with Terry Crawford as his nurse.
What did you think of them bringing the entire cast to do this movie?
I mean, it was fun. It definitely I, especially when you look at the differences between House of Dark Shadows and Night of Dark Shadows. Of this is, you can kind of tell this is Dan trying to reach for this grandiose version in House of Dark Shadows, where he's just everyone's there. They have all of these needless scenes of huge casts, whether it's this extremely busy funeral scene, which is wonderful in the rain. The actors talk about like, oh, it was our very first day, and they brought us up in these fancy limos. And what we didn't realize is these limos were going to be used in the filming production, and then we spent hours being hosed down for the fake rain. So started off with a bang and then got messy, and later on it's like, okay, sure, I'll go do some of these other scenes because they'll be a bit more civilized than what you made us go through in the rain there. Or they did the dinner where David comes in seeing Carolyn. It's just like,
Yeah.
oh, I get it. We just had a funeral, but everybody's at that table. And if you've been watching the show, you're used to kind of that rule of like there's 5 to 6 speaking cast members in an episode.
Yep.
And once in a while you get 7, and you're like, this is crowded in here. Where are the exits? So in the film, where it's just there's all these people, and everybody's there. Not everybody's necessarily doing things. Beth's
Right.
in the background prepping a needle. Nicholas is checking some vitals. You've got your victim on the bed, and then you have at least 3 people just supervising the whole thing. But it was fun to see everybody was there. It was wonderful for a lot of the actors who kind of had a bit to do to be like, okay, this is what you're like when you have time to learn your lines. They're
Right.
with them in the same way in a regular, you have 24 hours. We're tweaking it up until the last second, maybe 3 rehearsals now. How much are you going to remember? Or how much are you sitting there reading the teleprompter right behind the camera? Your eyes are just playing ping pong very dramatically. So it was fun in that way, just to see everybody, for them get to do a little bit. You got to see some of the characters having a little bit more to do or a little bit less, because obviously it's not a soap opera, so we're not going to have a whole evolution of David's character from
Right.
trying to take out Roger to this precocious little youngster to the victim of ghosts and stuff. It's very much just like, okay, you're around, you're pulling pranks on poor Maggie, who seems to be Catherine is screaming every other scene for the first few. Everyone's scaring her, and then but yeah, it was nice to see that, and nice to see some of the other actors, like Catherine Lee Scott especially. And
Right.
she as much as Jonathan Frid is definitely a major character, it's like Catherine is in as many scenes, if not more, than him. And getting kind of those opportunities of like, okay, this is her first motion picture film, her first chance of trying this out, and it's like she was good, and she
Yep.
looked fabulous. They did daytime shots, they did nighttime shots. It's like, wow. Got to see you try it all out and succeed.
Do you think Catherine Lee Scott could have been, the next really female movie star? I mean, she's really great in this film.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, I agree with you. She looks beautiful. I mean, I know for people who like you and I who have seen the series, we saw her in that dress before, the Josette dress, and we see her here in this movie.
Yeah.
But for those who haven't, like if you just haven't and you don't want to go see the series, go look at the pictures because they'll do it justice too.
Mm-hmm.
When you see her standing next to Jonathan and they're at the altar, it just. But this movie, I agree with you. It's so sorry. I didn't mean to not let you answer, but it's really, it's really. I love her. I wish she would have got to do more movies.
No, she was. I mean, she's a very attractive person, even nowadays, and just she was very intelligent and capable, and you would see that on the show. I mean, whether it was times where she's sitting there doing recitations of all the boat parts, and just that's one of my favorite scenes with Catherine, where she and Joel Crothers are there, and he's trying to teach her about the boat, and she's like, no, 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 I'm going to be the one reciting the parts to you. And that's the sort of thing. It's like, you not only memorized a bunch of, you're from, I'm generalizing here, but you grew up in a farm in the Midwest, so I don't know if you have a lot of boating knowledge. And she did it, but she did it in this genuine way of like, on the one hand, I am being a smartass and showing I know what I'm doing, but
Right.
also being very genuine and excited. It's like you're listing stuff off. It's really hard to pull that all off and make it look genuine. And also, oh, this is a sweet coupley moment as we're trying to bring these two characters together. But yeah, I agree with you. Of it really, especially in this obviously Dark Shadows, the soap opera was it was on during the day. There's no reruns. There's no there's no streaming services to catch up on it later. So
Right.
for a lot of I'm imagining these fancy Hollywood people, it's like they're busy in the middle of the day. They're not running home to catch it at 3 o'clock like other folks were. And even still, even if they were running home, it's not everybody had the newest TV. Like we sit here now watching it in black and we see it like in color when
Right.
it is in color, and we see it in high def whether or not the show was the show was not intended to be, so we can see all the strings and wires and such. But for them it's like you would be seeing it on whatever very expensive TV that you had in the house that was nothing compared to what we can put in our pockets these days, just visually.
Right.
um, but then you go to the movie theater where it's like, okay, these are huge screens and somebody's paying the big bucks to keep them up to date. And you can finally have like, oh, wow, we can, Catherine Lee Scott's face is 20 feet tall and we can see that she has great skin, good hair, and she can do her lines versus, a hazy little speck on your fuzzy black and white back at home. So, yeah, I think she was fabulous. I think a lot of the young actors in it were really good. And people talk about Kate Jackson getting kind of discovered through Dark Shadows,
Yeah.
and one of those where it's like, there's another multiverse out there where some of the other Dark Shadows actors got to go on to follow, finding their own paths out there. But and that's not to say Catherine Lee Scott didn't have her own acting career both on and off the screen. I mean, recently The Goldbergs was on reruns, and it was like, oh yeah, I forgot she's the girlfriend in that. Good for her. Um, so but it was amazing to see these folks that we know and adore in our way, but to see kind of that Hollywood-esque, the MGM treatment of them.
Right. Is there a movie you wish she would have got to be in or star in? Catherine, I mean.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm trying to think that era, which I'm not great remembering films. She's
Right.
just the type, as I said, I'm like, she was reciting both terminology there and making it work. So I'm like, here's a phone book, just put you up on the screen. She could
Right.
be, an ASMR queen. Those
Yes.
nice soothing.
I think the one thing I would have loved for her to do, because she was still to be could have did it and it wouldn't have been something necessarily related to Dark Shadows, but she could have did like Romeo and Juliet maybe on
Oh
the
yeah.
big screen or something, you know what I mean? She could have did a lot of different things. Dark Shadows had an amazing cast. Any one of them really could have been a big screen attraction, really, like Alexander, Jonathan, any one of them. But I think that's when I look at Dark Shadows, like not just in the series, but from the movies as a whole. I think that to me is the biggest missed opportunity of it all. Is it had amazing actors and actresses, and they never. I mean, they were in movies. Don't get me wrong, but they never got to be the big stars maybe they should have been from a theater, like from a movie theater standpoint.
Yeah. I mean, it's tricky because a lot of them, like a lot of the, I'm generalizing here. I'm remembering what I can. Everyone Google all the nonsense I'm about to say, because I may get about half of it right. But I feel like a lot of the older actors had more of a theater background,
Right.
and the younger actors, kind of a lot of them, like I know Laura Parker talks about, like, oh, I went to New York City, and it was this deal my husband and I were in where I would try acting in theaters and in television and see if lightning struck. And she got that Dark Shadows callback with Jonathan, where he, you know, told her not to be the ingenue, but to act like the witch, and it worked out. Um, so I feel like that might have been part of it too, where it's they had some really good connections.
Right.
to go into the theater, into the movie theater world. Um, and like they had the opportunity, but I think a lot of their connections with the older actors and the production team was more, not within that world. Dan Curtis was known for his golf series.
Right.
And, Joan Bennett was a fabulous actress in her own right and really contributed to the film noir genre. But on
Yeah.
the other hand, it's like that was, not the cup of tea at that moment in history. And so maybe that might be a part of it. I don't know. But yeah, I think a lot of them just, there's so much, especially with the way soap operas were filmed then, where it's like this is kind of the worst of both worlds, where you are doing, you're getting your script the night before, you have maybe 3 run-throughs, and then if the set's on fire and they have to put it out, you're just gonna have to suck it up and keep going. Alexandra Mulkey and Jonathan just plow through it and try not to get too distracted. And sometimes they did a great job with it, and I'm sure there's plenty of things that happened on that set that we'll never know about. And then
Right.
there's obviously some of those major bloopers that we all know, and sometimes we give them credit for, okay, they kept going, good for them, or sometimes it's like, oh no, they just understandably lost it, and it's hard not to based on what was happening that day, what we know of.
What did you think of the Lyndhurst estate as a whole, as Collinwood, compared to the Seaview Terrace?
um so for me, I kind of know just enough about art history and Americana to get myself in trouble. um and it's really, at least, like, from what I can recall of, like, thinking the visuals of how House of Dark Shadows, that is such a heavy late 19th century Gothic revival house.
Mhm.
And even Barnabas, they kind of are giving more of this Gothic revival feel to him. Um, Versus at least with Seaview, where it kind of has like a wing to it, where you're like, this is Tudory. I guess we can squint and make it work when we go back to the 1890s in
Right.
parallel time. But and I mean, they were always really good with costuming, I will say. And understandably, when they first started the show, they didn't know what they were doing. And those earlier references, you could tell they had initially planned to do the 1795 flashback more in the 19th century. But it's a fabulous place. Just like, it's really a cool estate. And they took advantage a bit of it in that film, and I would say more so in Night of Dark Shadows, where they're just, in that film they seem to be kind of running around the whole estate and just being like, oh, there's like this cool bridge over here. Let's do a fight scene here just for the sake of it. Let's go in a gazebo and have a near death scene. Oh, last time we were in the pool with David. This time let's do a drowning scene there, because half the fun of these pool scenes is you got to go in that nasty water at one point or another. um, like, it's very beautiful, and in its own right is kind of a character, with just
Right.
kind of how much they use it, how often they use it, just some of the stuff, like the bed that Maggie Evans is sleeping in. It's like, this bed is huge and amazing. And like, if this is the bed you're giving to the governess, I want to know what Elizabeth's bed is and Roger's bed are, because you'd hope they'd save themselves the nice stuff.
I'll-
Maybe it's an old mattress though.
if you got your mattress from like Goodwill, there's a problem here.
Yeah.
It's clearly a problem. But I love this scene where in House where Barnabas is walking across the field in the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
and he's walking toward his house. That itself feels like a presence. Like
Yeah.
the house where it's just like everything feels big about
Mm-hmm.
the about both movies, really, about, well, all three in a sense. But House of Dark Shadows, where he rings the doorbell, there's no knock on the door like there is the series,
Mm-hmm.
and he's let in, and now there's no Clarice Blackburn, unfortunately, to let him in.
Yeah, no. I mean, her wig makes a cameo though. I think they just, it got its own limo up from New York City. It's like, oh, this film, they they finally had the budget, and they could have saved it afterwards and given her an upgrade. But
Miss, Mrs. Johnson was probably capping some poor fellow. That's probably why she couldn't.
hey, you've got a son like Harry. There, you got to take people out every so often.
That's true.
She's got a big mysterious family. Who knows what they're all up to?
That's right.
But no, I mean, yeah, it's because I feel like initially we're following Maggie around. She's trying to find David, and you're going through these rooms and these places, but you're not. At least when I was rewatching it and trying to really take some ways trying to not to be like, how would this look as a non-Dark Shadows person?
Right.
And just like, okay, young attractive woman is looking for this David. And there's at least 3 different jump scares in the first few minutes. I'm just like, they're just really starting out hard here, just spooking everybody with it, and poor Catherine's gonna wear out her throat this way. But yeah, she's you're moving around and you're moving around rooms, but you don't know, like, okay, I'm moving around a bunch of rooms, and I'm all of a sudden like Willie's there to jump out at her, and then she's in the old house, and David jumps out and slams the door, but you can tell, okay, she's moved around enough rooms that we're probably in a, it's probably not a 3-bedroom household here, because you would have run out of space by now. But when Barnabas is going towards it, it's kind of our first, we've seen the hand at this point, but it's kind of that first glimpse you get of him. And it's also the first glimpse you get of the house.
Right.
And the film is called House of Dark Shadows. As much as, for me, it confuses me because I think Night should be the vampire film.
Right.
And I feel like the house, I don't know, with witches, I'm like, the house is definitely character in the other one with the witches and the house's history coming back to get Quentin, but long story long.
I think one of the other ways too, you could sort of look at this where sort of to separate it from the series to this is the series itself. I don't think is defined by horror. It's sort of every genre.
Mm-hmm.
With the movies, especially House and Night, they're horror. They're more horror genre movies where House is your vampire. I agree with you. It should have been called Night. Like,
I mean, that's something, obviously they wrote them at different times in different places, but right. Now as viewers in the modern era where they both exist, it's like I wish you could just flip them around. Oh well, too late now. But yeah, it definitely is that horror, and like within the soap opera structure, you kind of get it where it's like on the one hand you need things to happen to all the people, but on the other hand you can't really kill people off. Right. And even in Dark Shadows, it's like there are times they do kill major characters off, but not too often. Like, Alexandra Mulkey is kind of, she's killed off way, way later in this, like, really, when the ghost of Peter Bradford pops up to take out Chab, which it's like, okay. And this is such a clunky thing. And with, Barnabas having just willed himself back in time to save Vicky once before, it's like, it doesn't feel real. And it's always been one of those, why didn't Barnabas will himself back a second time and fix it? Like he's gone back to 1795 3 other times. What is he run out of stamps on his card or something? But like Catherine Lee Scott, when she breaks her contract, she gets to have a farewell scene in the convertible on her way off to Wincliffe. Or they do kill off, they technically kill off Carolyn for like half an episode. Right. And that's a huge deal because and every time, even now as a viewer, when they do the experiment and she dies, it's like, wait, I know this, but this is breaking the rules. You have to keep those central people around, and they're moving the plot forward until you take them out finally, and then you've got someone else to fill it in. Versus the films where it's definitely just like, no, this is a bloodbath. We can, and they take out Carolyn, they take out Daphne, they take out Roger, Stokes, Julia. It's like at the end of it, it's like you just have poor Elizabeth, and David's somewhere. He's probably going and playing in the swimming pool again. But
yeah. I think Elizabeth is in a catatonic state, right?
Yeah.
And David, like you said, he sort of eventually just disappears from this movie.
Yeah, he's like hanging out with Jeff when they give Jeff the silver bullets. He's just awkwardly there, and I never understood. He's just like kind of standing behind Roger Davis, just there, and it's not like, oh, here, David, you can have some bullets, or oh, David, we're gonna tell you what to do. He's just like this little shadow, and I think that's the last time we see him.
Yeah,
At the very least, oh hey, David, you're gonna go keep Elizabeth safe at Wingcliff tonight, and we'll catch up with you tomorrow.
yeah,
But at the same time, it's a different story, and it's not about the longevity of the Collins clan. It's very much this is Barnabas destroying, coming out of his coffin and destroying everything,
yeah.
and who knows who's left.
It's really, by the end of this movie, it's like literally there's almost like it's Jeff Clark and Willie Loomis or bust.
Yes.
you know, and
Catherine Lee Scott's, she's
she,
doing a good job doing the catatonic state. She does not flinch every time they lunge over top of her body, which good for her.
right,
I'm
but
like, I would not.
right, because by this time she's been jump scared so many times.
Yeah. Maybe
It's like,
that's how it works. They got all her scares out of her, and then she was just tired. And they're like, here you go, take a nap while everyone runs around with props. Runs around with all these prop arrows,
yeah,
harpoons. Sorry.
harpoons. I love the fact that one of the best lines in this movie is every wedding needs a witness,
Yeah.
and you're a witness to this one. I think it's such a beautiful line for gifts. I do want to ask you,
Mhm.
Jonathan Fritz has a line. He says, when they put this curse on me.
Yeah.
So he doesn't say Angelique, he doesn't say a witch.
Yeah.
Who do you feel they is?
It's hard. This is gonna probably sound way too academic of me, and nerdy, but in a lot of older love poetry from that time, then it kind of pulls from this like early English poetry. Love poetry will sometimes pull from Roman tradition, where there's like this motif of like these secret lovers and these mysteriously jealous people. And in Roman times, they would actually like they would talk about kisses. Like you hear this in Catullus about, let us live and let us love, my lesbia, and we're going to kiss each other thousands of times, and we're going to make up such a wild number that no one can know the secret number to curse us with. And
Right.
then that somehow gets into the English tradition, and it's a little weird and robbed. And I don't know. For me as a nerd, I was like, maybe that's where this is coming from. I never thought of it because at that in that point in the movie, there's so much going on. I
Yeah.
think it leaves a good door open to, oh, this could be the gender neutral day. That was in period until like the Victorian era. It could be an Angelique, it could be a boy, it could be a whole cult of people, the Leviathans. It's and it's one of those moments you're like, I wonder if Jonathan Frid had said yes to a second film,
Right.
they would have done kind of a 1795 backstory, and we almost would have had this version of we're taking the soap opera source material and then doing these larger than these movie theater productions of each of the stories.
Right.
Um, yeah, so sorry, my answer
No,
is none.
no, it's a difficult answer. You know what I mean? I don't. I think it could be anything really.
Mm-hmm.
I did this video with Mark, and he had said he felt it was the cult of Judah Zachary.
Oh, that would make sense. And Angelique
And
as
yeah,
a member of it,
right,
where you kind of get this loophole of she could still be the one who did the curse,
right,
and maybe he thinks she did it as part of the cult versus she was acting on her own.
right. I think
Or just Judah, let's just go back to Judah Zachary and cut
right,
the blonde out.
right, right. I think there's a world of possibilities for who, especially in the film, who laid the curse,
Yeah.
because the word "they" is such, it's so suggestive. So, what did you think of the end? Jonathan, Fred, Barnabas, he gets staked by, not necessarily Jeff Clark, but by Billy and Jeff in a sense.
Yeah. No, I mean, I like that. You definitely get Willie kind of redeeming himself, where in the beginning of the film, he's the one that starts all of this nonsense.
Right.
And he's under Barnabas's thrall, and gets physically beaten up, and the makeup they use for all of his bashings. But poor guy. But by the end, it's like, because he initially is trying to stop this. I didn't get initially for some reason. The first time, I remember the very first time I watched it, I thought that Willie like jumped up to save Barnabas.
Right.
And it would kind of make sense of like, oh, if you're this Renfield-like character and you're in the thrall, that you would literally give yourself to save your master. But obviously in rewatching, it's like, no, he was on his own trying to stop Barnabas and save Maggie. And unfortunately, that was the same moment that that Clark pulled the trigger. And then he just rips it out of, some like behind the scenes, rips it out of his back and shoves it into Barnabas. It's kind of this wild, unexpected tag team duo.
Yeah. What did you think of? Now they do Night of Dark Shadows. David Selby.
Yes.
You have there's Kate Jackson, Laura Parker, Grayson Hall, and Grayson Hall is not a doctor in this one. She's more of a servant.
A lot of Drake, yeah.
Yeah.
It really is just it's a weird version of like the parallel time story.
Yeah.
Because you have Grayson is playing a servant again, and she's trying to bring her mistress back from the dead, who is some sort of witchy thing. And the witch wants to be with David Selby. You have a different brunette, but a very beautiful brunette who's the wife coming to the estate. You even have references, which is very much out of Rebecca, about how the previous mistress of the house did the tea for the whole estate. And they're like, oh yes, I guess we'll keep up that tradition. And it's such a nod to the show and to Rebecca, the piece that 1970 is very heavily borrowing from.
Right.
But no, it's a great film, and I think that Grayson had a lot of fun being this mysterious housekeeper, and very like, and just some of her like wardrobes and stuff, those like very flowy gowns and things. It's definitely not, she might have the Julia Hoffman helmet hair from the beginning of the show,
Right.
but the clothes they give her, it's like, these are these like really flowy pieces, and this is a very, I would read this as more like a psychedelic hippy dippy kind of person versus this woman of science who happens to do hypnotism in her free time.
Yeah. I like the fact that when they come up to the house, they're driving up. This isn't the way this is shot. It's so different from how House is shot. It's not. They don't shoot it the exact same way, and that's something I love Dan Curtis for. This, even though this is the same location, you're getting the same exact location in a sense. You're not getting the same sort of camera angles and work. Like you've talked about. They're more exploring the house. You're getting more of the house than what you were in the first one. So, God, I'm sorry.
Even during the approach,
Right.
Daphne is like, oh my gosh, is this all part of the estate? And he's like, oh yes, and it's over 200 acres, and the house has this many rooms, and
Yep.
here's a little bit about the previous owner, who is named Elizabeth. So is this all part of the same universe? Is this like after Barnabas, or is this just a different Dark Shadows multiverse? And we don't have time to get around to that. It's fine. We're gonna jump to a new time band in a few weeks, anyways. But I mean, the fact that they pull over, they put the convertible roof on, and then they keep going. It's such a little detail, but it's definitely this is a big driveway.
Right. I love the fact that they. Well, right. This sort of feels like Scott's Infinity Staff. That's what this is. That's what this is. No, but it's. You're right. The drive up is beautiful, right? The trees, the mansion. I love the approach. Everything about this movie, it feels so like I said, so different, and it's great for that. And I love the introduction of John Carlin and Nancy Barrett's characters in this film. They're friends,
Eric.
Quentin's, right?
Yeah, Alex and Claire this
Yep.
time. Okay.
Yep.
Sorry, that was one I was like, I'm never gonna remember because it's fine. It's Willie Loomis and Carolyn in a very different time, you know.
Right.
He's writing books again. He probably has a vampire locked up somewhere, but you know, we don't get around to that. Yeah,
No.
but I liked having them there. It was funny of like, oh, we're just their friends, and we just showed up 2 weeks ago and have been putzing around while you all are traveling the world or whatever.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind a friend like that to let me have a nice little cottage on the Lyndhurst estate with no rent, and I get a piece of artwork out of it.
You get to just chill with oh, no big deal, right?
Write books, cycle around, yell at some ghosts going into a greenhouse once in a while, shoot the groundskeeper creeping on you, or just buy curtains and install some good locks, and you're all set.
Listen, if they're gonna let me shoot the groundskeeper, I want a Smith and Wesson. Okay, that's all I'm gonna say.
There you go. Then it's not just a little scar; it's a whole. Not a lot left.
Right. But I'm gonna go Dirty Harry on him. That's what it's gonna be.
There you go.
But
But it's such a small cast though. Like
it
you
is.
have your people in the past, but like in the regular time band, it's like 7 or 8 people, including the Ghost of Angelique, and it really does feel more like a Dark Shadows episode where you have this tiny cast. Obviously, a lot more and nicer sets than the show would ever have, but
Yeah.
it's a tiny little thing, and yet it's such a big story.
Right. They don't. You're right. They don't have a lot of characters in the present, and some of
Yeah.
the characters in the present are sort of playing off characters from the past.
Mm-hmm.
There's Gerard. James Storm is in this movie. Christopher Peanock is in the past.
Yeah, the brother.
He's the brother who's married to Angelique.
And then Diana Malay is,
She's married to Quentin, I believe. And
yeah, Charles. But I don't know. I'm just like, wow. Like you're giving up Diana for Laura. I'm like, wow. But I mean, maybe Laura was already taken, and you found a nice blonde lady. We look similar. I don't know.
you went from one burning pot to the other.
There you go.
It's just,
And both of them in a different time band are married to Big Lou himself.
that's it. That's it. That's it. But I love the Laura Parker has very little lines in this movie.
Oh
But
yeah.
the fact that
Does
she
she talk in the present even? Like I think they do the quiet ghost role, which
she
the
does
show plays with.
she doesn't talk in the present there. She has really, I think she has 2 lines in all.
Mhm.
She has, she says, bring the painting to life, Charles. And she has a
Yeah.
line with the little girl that Grayson Hall,
Sarah Castle, yeah.
yeah, is playing. Give me 1 second, please.
Yeah.
Sorry. I'm sorry. Sorry. All right. Uh, but yeah, I think that she has two lines, right? So she bring the painting to life, and when she's talking to the little girl,
Yeah.
but
And
for
don't
her,
forget, we get to see Clarice Blackburn. She does come back for her revenge. She's the one who sets the whole thing up in the beginning.
yeah,
I just when Angelique is being arrested at this point, she's coming down the stairs. She's a convicted witch, and this little girl wants to come up and hug her.
yeah,
And I'm imagining Clarice as like the mom or aunt or grandmother. It's hard to say. And I don't want to pick. I don't want to choose for her, but I know better than trying to guess women's ages. But she's a convicted witch, and this woman is like, okay, I'm just gonna let this little girl talk to the witch and get the necklace, and the
yeah.
witch is gonna say things, and I'm gonna let the little girl wear the witch's necklace forever. It's like I would wait till that little girl went to bed and take that potentially demonic necklace and you know bury it where put it in the catacombs with put it in the catacombs with Charles the next day because it's like you know but yeah, so Angelique does talk with Sarah Castle, and she tells Charles to bring the painting to life, which is Quentin does later on.
Yeah. I love the fact that Laura Parker, even though she has very little lines, she sells with her body so well and her looks, her outstretched arms, her just sitting there. She's an enchantress in every way in this film.
Yeah,
Do you think the missing footage from this film hurts this movie?
I think it does because I feel like there are bits and pieces of it where things are kind of happening and they don't seem to fully add up.
Yeah.
Like at the end of the film, when we think it's all happy, and Claire and Alex are going to the Cape. Alex says to Quentin something to the effect of, "We were really worried that you were keeping Angelique alive,
Yeah.
but we know that that was what Carlotta was doing."
Right.
So it's one of those where it's like, how did Quentin get the power to keep her? Like Carlotta died, so how did Quentin? And clearly somebody kept her alive. Maybe because Carlotta dies,
Right.
and then Angelique's still haunting as a body downstairs. So Carlotta's death did not automatically regenerate Angelique. So that's just something where I'm like, okay, something. I feel like that's one of those moments of something might have happened here. We don't really know why. Oh, they're going to get Carlotta, but let's take the really inconvenient, creepy basement long cut to get there. I'm like, you live in this house, you have keys, or even there are French doors. You can throw a rock at them, smash one open, and go find her. And then she's up in the tower. It's not even a like, oh, she might have gone to the tower or the basement. Let's split up and look for her. And I get why we went to the basement. It was very atmospheric, extremely spooky, but it just, I don't, I feel like we needed a little bit more explanation of what Angelique, we know her motive, but we don't know how she operates. And there's some cool scenes, but I'm like, I don't feel like I feel like we're jumping a couple steps to get to these scenes. And I'm willing to try it for the sake of the movie, but usually by the end of the film, it's nice to get even then the back explanation of like, oh, this is sorry, we had to go to the basement because witches are afraid of water.
Right. I love the candlelit scene with Quentin and or David's always Quentin, Kate Jackson, who are going down in there.
Yeah.
And my favorite scene out of all this, I got two. The Quentin's possession when David's always walking through, Quentin's theme is playing. I love it. It's really well timed. And my favorite sequence is the race sequence where they're like racing their cars.
Yeah.
It's I love it. They're like bumping each other.
The bongos are going crazy in the background.
Yep. What's your favorite scene from Night of Dark Shadows? You got?
So kind of similar to yours, in the basement, there's the bit where Quentin goes one way and Daphne goes the other way, and Angelique closes the door. It's more just this visual of like the light, and Angelique is going towards Daphne, and instead of letting her scream, the soundtrack just fully takes over, and it's the violin is doing that kind of squealy sound that's very scream like, and it's just, but it's weird of like that Daphne's almost robbed of her scream while the ghost is kind of taking, the ghost, the music, the atmosphere is kind of taking over.
Right.
And I mean, I give Daphne credit because it's just a camera in front of her, and it's like, I can barely act with nowadays in the modern era where we're all used to having Zoom camera calls in front of us all day. So I give, clearly she was a great actress who did a lot of good stuff. So I give, anytime they do those like super close up, oh, the monster's right there, you just have to pretend.
Right. Kate Jackson does an amazing job selling in this movie. And I think that's what Night of Dark Shadows really, I think, does perfectly, even without the extra footage.
Mm-hmm.
Before we get to Tim Burton's, what would your ranking, out of scale 1 to 10, what would you give House of Dark Shadows?
I give how like so I've watched the Hammer films before, and they are fun, but it's not necessarily my type of genre of just like, and I feel like it's kind of very linear, like, okay, vampire comes back, vampire destroys family.
Right.
Someone destroys vampire or not, the end. But it was a well done film because of the Dark Shadows connections. It's like I really enjoyed it for that, of like, oh, here's a bizarrely violent Dark Shadows parallel time. So I'd give it like a 7 or an 8. I thought like, and it's not anyone's issue. It's just my personal.
Right.
This is not quite my cup of tea, but I can certainly appreciate the flavor, even if it's not what I want. I'd rather a coffee, but I know it's a good tea.
Right.
I liked Night more because it was just a bit more suspense. And I felt like there was a bit of kind of the metaphor of kind of an abusive husband in a way.
Yeah.
Metaphor or not, or just very obviously, where he's drowning her. But it's that I found more interesting. And to me, it's like I kind of like that sort of horror more, where it's not necessarily the I will be physically hurt as much as it's like, no, this is just gonna mess with your head.
Right.
And you'll want to die by the end of the film. Versus, okay, yeah, we've ripped off all your limbs, so I guess you're done. But no, and so Night I would probably give like an 8 or a 9.
Right.
Because I do at times watching it, I'm like, you really have to. I feel for me, just I like having stories and plots, and I like thinking things through, and I feel like I really have to pay attention because there's a lot of just, it's easy to follow, just to jump along and keep up with it, but there's a lot of I'm making assumptions here. No one is sitting us down to explain how Angelique got back in her body.
Yeah.
So, as much as it's a great ending. And then do you want me just to keep going with the final film?
We'll get right into that. I give House a 7, like out of 10,
nice.
and I give Night a straight 10. I really, even without the footage, I think it does. Both are good films. Like, both are good to watch.
Yeah.
Now, for our next and final discussion, this movie has more issues than a dead body inside Mrs. Johnson's bedroom.
There you go.
But directed by Tim Burton, starring Johnny Depp. This movie, there's like a who's who of who's in this movie. Jack Yorhaven, Michelle Pfeiffer, my God, Chloe Mortiz. I mean, just Eva Green.
Mm-hmm.
Just there's a huge. This is a Hollywood cast.
Yeah, and they're pulling in incredible people that like from the cast list, looking at the cast list, you're like, they pulled in some great people that really could have hit this out of the ballpark.
Yep.
And that's why it's so hard, because it's like, it's not the money. They definitely had enough money. They definitely did really good visuals and a great soundtrack.
Yep.
And the acting is fabulous. And it's just that the writing is so, and especially because this was the second script, and at least I haven't seen the script, but based on hearing from all the reputable Dark Shadows nerds out there, mad respect for them, that like it's just, I'm like, they'll say it's better. And yeah, based on the writer and what else he had written, I'm like, yeah. And there's so many ways you could have done it, but it's just, and it's even little things with the writing. Like, one of my biggest nitpicks, I love the beginning,
Yeah.
but one of the biggest nitpicks is Angelique kills off Barnabas, and his parents come over from England.
Right.
They're the only ones who go on the boat in that moment. You see his parents in the house with him. How are these Collinses related to Barnabas?
Right.
Like, his parents are taken out by the giant seahorse sculpture bit, which
Right.
not quite that era, but not in America, but it's fine. They were really bougie and imported a whole army of artists. Like, it's good enough. It's Hollywood. They want to make it big and impressive, but again, I'm like, it's America. We didn't attract artists like that because we were still the boonies at this point, and they were doing great over in Italy still. We couldn't train our own folks yet. But it just bugs me if we never learn how these people are related to Barnabas.
Right.
And it could have been so easy to just have another little boy go on the boat with them. Or when Elizabeth talks about hearing about, oh, Barnabas was superstitious and he believed he was a vampire, just in the journal of Theodore Collins, his brother, this is what happened. Like, and to be fair, I guess you could make that same argument with House of Dark Shadows, but at the same time, it's like, I guess I'm more willing to forgive that, because it's like, this is at the same time as the show, it's very much pulling that audience.
Right.
Versus 2012 Dark Shadows, which is so much later, that you're going to have a lot of folks, our age and younger, that did not grow up with the original film, maybe didn't even know about it. They just started tagging along to the movie theater one night. And it's just like, you can't even write. It's a story about blood relations. That's your tagline. It's Barnabas's intro monologue, his outro monologue, and yet, are these people your family? Is this one of the villagers just took over the house after they buried you and said, sure, I'm changing my name to Collins. And here we go.
This movie here, like this whole premise.
Yeah.
This movie should really, Dark Shadows from 2012 should have been part of a 3-movie set, really.
Yeah.
And it should have started in 1795.
Yes.
And we should have got how Barnabas became the vampire. Now, we know that story, but there are people who don't, and
you're attracting an international world market 40 years later. So yeah, there's plenty of people that will have no idea what's going on until you tell them.
To me, this would have started on a ship, and it would have started as Angelique and Josette and the whole clan coming from Martinique to Collinsport. You know what I mean? I know a Monday morning quarterback.
Yeah, no. But at the same time, it's fun to play that game of how, it's said and done. Everybody knows we're not writing a Dark Shadows film. As far as I know, you're not writing it. I'm not writing it. I'd love to, but not yet.
No, I wrote a 1795 story, and I'm good. I'm
good. Nice.
But
and the potential's there, and I feel like that would be an interesting way to do the Barnabas story now.
Right.
Is to start in the past and go forward.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I'm also at the same time, I'm kind of at this mindset of we've had a lot of different
Right.
time bands. And it's kind of like, why don't we just jump to, dark shadows in the age of cell phones and laptops? And, are we going to do a Zoom exorcism anytime soon?
I think
Stokes is in the other room. Stokes
that's
can't get over from the cottage.
that's something that shocked me. I think the most thing and I don't know why I'm most shocked by this, but I think what shocks me most about the 2012 Tim Burton film is it's made in 2012, but it's set in the 70s.
Yeah.
It's like,
And
why?
that's not the show. That's not like, it's just after the show. It's not the present day. And then it's about a guy who's 200 years older than that. So it's just, you've already made three different
Right.
you made three different time band headaches there for just the average viewer. And yeah, I do think that the whole bit with him kind of absorbing the modern era, that was well done. I was very amused by that.
Right.
And it's hard because every time I watch the film, I'm like, where's the moment that I just fully just the veil fell down and I realized this is just awful and won't get better. But that part I'm like, this I'm for. And I think it is fun because we get hints of Barnabas being hesitant in the show, but then you get bits where it's like, oh, I'm gonna drive Vicky Winters, and oh, we got in an accident. And then I think later in the show he drives someone else and gets in an accident. It's like, who's giving keys to a 200-year-old vampire? Vicky's driven herself around before. Like,
I always joke. I did a top 5 suspect list of people who taught Michael Myers how to drive, and on that list is Barnabas. So, but I think you're making a great point because with the thing I liked that I wish they would have did a lot more of or deeper psychology of is Maggie Evans / Victoria Winters talking, like seeing ghosts, sort of being able to communicate with them, but they don't take full advantage of that, and they don't really keep it going enough.
No. And it's hard because it's like they give her a lot of agency.
Yep.
And she does her own thing, but then at the end it's like, oh well, even Angelique is dead, I'm still going to do my zombie walk to Widow's Hill, even though all of her other magic has stopped.
Right.
Which, okay, fine, whatever. I get it. We need a good chase scene. But then even then she's like, well, I'm still just going to jump off the cliff because this guy isn't into me. It might be a vampire. And I'm like, I know what we're doing here. Like, it is kind of cool, the parallelism of he ends up back at the bottom of Widow's Hill and he now has his Josette as his vampire bride. But it's just a little, like, maybe if the widows had talked with her.
Right.
And, or, this was her fulfilling the widow's prophecy from the original show. And they could have sprinkled that out a little bit more.
I agree with you. I wish they could have easily had voices saying Maggie, calling her to that location and having her jump. I'm with you totally. One of my, I tell you who I really liked, Jackie Earle Haley's Willie Loomis. We don't get enough. One of my favorite lines is when they dump Julia's body in the ocean. He goes, I didn't like that bitch anyway, Barnabas.
I mean, to be fair, that Julia Hoffman there's a part of me that's like, I love you because you're just this ridiculous character. But on the other hand, it's like, no, you're great to watch, but in person, you would be an awful house guest. You've had 3 years to work with this kid and at least be like, hey, just don't tell everyone you're talking to ghosts. Or convince the family of like, hey, maybe your family's had weird superstitious stuff happen before. Maybe this is just his thing.
David's mother is a ghost too. That's another part of this is David's mother got killed by Angelique. Carolyn's a werewolf.
Yeah.
It just...
So what's that make Paul Stoddard at this point? Is he a zombie or something in the basement?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe.
Is that why Elizabeth's always running up and down the stairs? She's got to go check in on him, feed him another brain.
Makes you wonder what happened with all the servants. They got fired.
There you go.
Fired. They weren't really fired.
Mrs. Johnson's safe because she's just bless her heart, but I don't know if her brain would have a lot left at this point. It's a little old.
Well, I mean, here's a woman who sleeps with a 45 underneath her pillow, so I'm sure.
Hey, good for her. That's one way to keep yourself from going down to the basement.
That's it. Like, oh, I'm going down to the basement. Give me 1 second. Like, let me grab my piece here. But
I love the gag in the film where they have this little old Mrs. Johnson who isn't she's just kind of doing her own thing, and I'm like, and I know other Dark Shadow, smarter, bigger Dark Shadows nerds than I have said, of looking at this film and comparing it to one that I grew up with, which was the Brady Bunch movies.
right.
And that's how you do it, where you can still make fun of Dark Shadows in the 60s, but also bring it to the modern era.
Right.
Because there is stuff, it'd be so much fun to be like, why are you hiring a governess? Why are these children not in a normal, in a school or a boarding school or
Right.
taking online classes? You know, and they had their little moments where they Elizabeth gets into what do you think of politics and the role of the sexes and the president, but I don't know, it just there's moments where they kind of teeter towards comedy and then they ease up, and there's moments where they teeter towards horror and they ease up. The biggest, and I think just kind of the bluest joke that like I I could have gone with it if they made it work, but it just felt like such a dud was when Julia does the whole confidentiality where she goes, she starts getting down, and they just weirdly play that intrigue music instead of they could have done a sexy little jazz bit there or something, and it would have been okay, I can roll with this, but they got to save the sex for the gravity defying scene where Angelique has all sorts of new powers,
Right.
which even then I'm like, okay, some of this is funny, but why does she have 6 arms and what do they do? I don't know. Maybe if her 6 arms started putting the room back together again, I would have found that funny. I don't know. Maybe I'm weird.
No, Evergreen and Michelle Pfeiffer make this movie watchable because
Yes.
their performances, they're
How
being
about
very
we just have a bloodbath and they can just fight it out over the canneries and
right.
just a shotgun versus witchcraft, and just I don't know. Elizabeth has infinite ammo or something.
Right. She's been going to the armory recently. she's she's got one of them magazines with all the guns. She's been ordering the special
She
bullets.
picked one up from Herschel in The Walking Dead. She got one of his
Right.
infinite ammo guns.
I like I like that. I like
We're
that.
protecting the farmhouse. But no, they're really good, and it's hard because I'm like, a lot of other people were good, but they just weren't written to shine. And the only thing I have with Michelle Pfeiffer is they clearly there was something in the contract about how many times she had to go down flights of stairs, because
Yeah.
I think it's not until 3/4 of the way through the film when they have the happening at the house that it's the first time you see Elizabeth in the foyer and she's not coming down the flight of stairs.
Yeah.
And I get it, it's fun and it's dramatic, but if you've seen it 5 times in a row, it's oh, okay, we can only do so much.
Right.
Later, it's kind of cool because when she fights with Ava Green, she goes back up the stairs. So you get that kind of fairy tale, you're doing the story one way and the story backwards, but we don't need 5 times to lead to one time.
No. I wish they would have they had Alice Cooper as a cameo.
Yeah.
I wanted Alice Cooper to play Barnabas's father, and I wanted this
Oh.
I wanted this to be where Joshua Collins was Dr. Joshua Collins who tried to save his son from
Oh, yeah.
tried to cure him, but he couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And that to me could have been your I don't know, there's a lot to
And
where
that
they
could have
could
been so deep, and you could have even had some funny little humor in there about Barnabas, for whatever reason, deciding this is the one. Well, no, they haven't. Aside from Josette, this Dark Shadows doesn't seemingly do the whole everyone looks like someone else.
Right.
But you could play with that of like, I don't know, Barnabas is like awkwardly trying to talk with Alice Cooper and is like thinks it's his father. Maybe you do a little of the running joke of like, oh, maybe, oh, I thought it was a woman, but now it's my dad, and I'm just this very confused man out of like there's ways you could lean into that comedy, but also have this deep like seeking forgiveness from his dad bit. And then that motivates him to go to Julia for the treatments versus she just like is bobbing along and notices in the disco ball he doesn't have a reflection, or forget exactly how she gets to her blood draining gig.
I love the fact that Eva Green, Angelique, just takes off her panties and just puts them on.
Yep. She's like, have fun with this.
Like, oh my god.
But that's like reverse Pavlonia training, though. She shouldn't be doing that to him if she wants to. Anyways, I won't say much more. And there's a little bit of humor of having little David being like, why are these here?
Yeah.
But I think they cut it off and jump into the next scene. And I'm like, you need to have Barnabas like just stutter and do like a Gene Wilder, like little like weird word stuttery bit with it. Just, I don't know, even like the little, the collar vent trick.
What, at scale 1 to 10, what do you give this movie?
It's hard because every time I'm like, it's so pretty and it starts off so well. And I finally get to the scene where Julia and Barnabas, she's inspecting him, and I'm like, okay, we're done here. Like, you did something to, like, this is not my Julia Hoffman character. I could have gone with it if you were actually making this a joke versus it's kind of a joke, but then you play the intrigue music, so that makes me think I should find this mysterious versus just okay. Yeah. Anyways, like a 3 or a 4. I'm gonna update because I gave the House of Dark Shadows, I'm gonna give like a 6 or a 7. If I'm giving this a 3, I'm recalibrating. So Dark Shadows 2012 is like a 3.
Right.
House of Dark Shadows is a 7, and Night of Dark Shadows is a 9. I was on 3 different scales there. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. I'm with 1000%. 2012 Tim Burton's film, and we mean this. No disrespect to the people who were in it.
Yeah, no, they did their job. They did what they were paid to do, and they did do that well. But it was just a lot of, why did people tell them to do these things?
They get a 3. The soundtrack is good. It's amazing.
Oh yeah.
There are performances to pay attention to that we talked about. I think that the sets are good. Some of the sets are good.
Oh, the sets are beautiful. Like, yes, I'm being a snob and being like, it's too fancy for America. We were like poor and backwoodsy then. Should have been more arts and crafts movement style. But no one wants to look at that. It's give me all that. Give me all the ridiculous columns and crazy fish things. Although I will say the secret passageway with the wolves howling, that was kind of self-defeating.
Right.
If you're going to have a secret passage that announces itself as, look, here, the secret passage is opening. It's like, no. Fine, I get it. It's going to make rust because, rusty dramatic noises, but it's been a few centuries. No, it's fabulous in that way. And that's why it's so hard, because I'm like, it has all the ingredients and the writing, and hearing from so many different fans how they would tweak it. And I'm just like, all of these sound so good. And there are horror comedies out there. And there are bits and pieces of it where I'm like, I kind of see it, but I also see you kind of halfway reaching and then pulling back on both. So I don't get good horror and I don't get good comedy. And I just am very confused by the end of it all. And, it's almost...
There's so many things in this film, like where it feels like it's starting to hit, and like you said, it's pulling back, it's missing on a lot of its targets. I just think do I watch it? Sure, I'll watch it. I'll throw it in.
Yeah, it's it's in the list. Usually, once a year, I feel like around October, I watch all three. And there's always a part of me, it's like, I would love to be one of those people that could see the joy that comes from this film.
Right.
I feel like part of it is I need to have like the Dark Shadows brain, and then this is its own little world. But because I mean, and I'm happy for people that do this, and I've said this once or twice before. It's like I get a little tired with people being aggressive online. Like I know sometimes, like as people know, I reshare stuff on Twitter that I find from different fans enjoying different things in Dark Shadows, and I don't always fully agree with everything that I'm resharing. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
you really like that, you really like Carolyn's friend Donna, who gets taken out by Chris Jennings, and I'm kind of like, she's just a know-it-all, and like she's a red shirt, but okay, I'll reshare this because it's someone finding joy in Dark Shadows. It's a perspective I haven't thought of before, and it got me to think, and maybe someone else will join the Donna fan club. But
Right.
anytime you share anything from Dark Shadows, I feel like there's somebody who just aggressively attacks it, and I'm like, no, like I know that's how Twitter works, but like our little corner can just let it be.
I've literally had this conversation with everybody, and I mean this to anybody in the sound of our voice. Listen, you do not have to like the 2012 movie,
Yeah,
but for God's sakes, do not troll its fan base or pick on them, bully them, be mean to them. They have every right to like their movie.
yeah.
It's
It doesn't take. It's not. It's not because we have this movie we had to turn around and get rid of a secret other Dark Shadows film. We didn't turn around and take out the Curse of Dark Shadows.
right.
But the way some people act of like you can only have so much Dark Shadows, and it's like no, like let them have their own little parallel time band, and they're having fun over there.
Mm.
I don't always get all the things that people are talking about over in that time band, but I'm happy that they're happy in their own little world. Um, and it's also for all of us, it's like that film did bring a lot of energy to the other Dark Shadows stuff. Like they did they did some of the cleanups of the other two films. I think it led, if I remember right, it led to the Dark Shadows Coffin Box came out. I want to say around that time or a little later. We ended up with a ton of big finished production releases that year, and it's just hey, it got Dark Shadows out there. It's a couple more hashtags on social media, which leads to numbers that prove engagement. And every so often, someone watches these things, and then we're like, hey, come over to Tubi and check out the original series. If you kind of feel like some of these stories were interesting, but you want more backstory, and it's like, oh, we've got 1,225 episodes of backstory, front story, side story. You might not get Carolyn as a werewolf, but you get a lot of other Carolyns out there.
So, if you could pick somebody to write and direct a Dark Shadows movie, who would you pick?
Oh. I'm not good with these things. I'm sorry. I'm terrible. See, I might pick the people that wrote the Brady Bunch movies, the Brady Bunch sequel, Addams Family Values, of like we're taking a franchise that has an intense older base that were once young, and we're making fun of the whole thing, but in a way that's loving and respectful.
Right.
Of like we know enough of what to do to be respected. We're also making you laugh. We also know how to write it for the next generation of kids. That was me. Was the kid who watched those
Right.
movies on repeat so many times and found the TV, found both of the TV shows and watched them. Um, or maybe the people that did the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina,
Right.
which again, the most recent season had a huge nod to like it's based off of the graphic novel series, but it had a huge nod to the 90s Sabrina the Teenage Witch.
Yeah.
But also it was this like wild metaphysical like I'm a philosophy nerd. I'm a recovering philosophy and English major, um, as well as knowing too much, just enough about art history to get myself in trouble. I can get myself in trouble in these other avenues. But it just at the same time is like, ooh, you're having some fun with metaphysics and time bands and all that nonsense. And also just telling kind of a dumb little, telling your own little version of Groundhog Day in a sense.
Right.
But it's stuff like that. We've in this age of reboots, we've seen so many writers that
Right.
have taken, and even with what Big Finish has done, have taken the time to learn enough about the material,
Right.
and they're laughing, they're getting all of us people that are super into these genres to love what they're doing, even though they're making fun of it all, but also telling a very different story because it's, like a
Yeah.
lot of people, it's years later, and we all now have our fancy cell phones, and there's certain things we've thought about in different ways than back in the day, especially in the streaming era where you watch these shows now and it's like, okay, we don't all say da bomb anymore, or oh yeah, we're a little more careful about some of the things we run around and say now that we all have our cameras in our pockets. But some folks are a little bit more aware of the news than, and some other folks are had a little too much news and have have found ways to kind of decompress. Yeah, but that, I don't know. I'm here for anyone who wants to take up the mantle of trying to do something with Dark Shadows.
Right.
Like somebody who's, you don't have to have watched the series 16 times through and know it backwards and forwards, but at least enough to kind of have watched it and just, oh, isn't it funny that every character likes walking, reading, and picking flowers? Like, I'm just gonna make that be one character's personality. And no
Right.
one's gonna get it who hasn't watched the show, but all the nerds are gonna be like, yes. um, just little thing, or I don't know, do the 6-person rule for a bit, where like just every time like more than 6 people come in the room, somebody like ducks out, I don't know, and just leaves a note behind. Oh, sorry, I had to go, but I left a note with Mrs. Johnson. So now Clarice Black, now Dr. Julia Hoffman's not here, but she's going to leave the note with Willie Loomis, who wasn't there. So that way Willie Loomis and Barnabas can spend half the episode recalling the last episode where Julia and Angelique did this thing.
I asked this on Twitter, so I'll have this as an add-on for
Yeah.
the Dark Shadows sequel series. How would you bring Barnabas back?
I feel like you definitely have to do it.
Right.
I like the way that Big Finish did it, where one, they did not bring him back right away. They let us have a little bit of time to be like, Barnabas, like, I'm imagining it as coming back as a TV show. And I would do like the mid-season, the traditional mid-season cliffhanger would be Barnabas is back,
Right.
but we don't fully know how, or like, he's been pulled, but and I would do like Big Finish did, where I'm like, you just put him in a new body,
Right.
and that's easy enough to do. The show had a bunch of different things. Maybe Julia and Barnabas are trying to do the experiment again, and I don't know, and with Adam's son or something, and like somehow Adam's son has the life force. You can obviously cast whoever you want to be Adam's son.
Right.
And then somehow, like in doing the experiment, the whole thing merges back into the Adam body, and Barnabas is gone. And like Big Finish, maybe that could be a plot line, is Barnabas is kind of pursuing his own body, kind of getting used to his new body. I don't know, but that would be enough for the Barnabas character. Although I guess, but you would have to do that with like only a couple select
Right.
folks. And the problem with the Dark Shadows world is, okay, you have an immortal Barnabas, you have an immortal Angelique and an immortal Quentin, and arguably Nicholas Blair.
Right.
So, and it wouldn't be fair to be like, oh, all 4 of these characters, just wacky body jumping hijinks. Here we go. They're all young 20 somethings. but definitely, like, Barnabas has, like, I feel like Barnabas would need to be in the show, and I feel like for a lot of the fan base, they're gonna, like, yes, in the previews they're gonna need to know Barnabas is around. You have to do the bit with the cane and the ring, like in the preview, like in that 30 seconds. I need that at least.
Right.
And maybe that's it. Maybe just we see the hand and the cane at the very end, and then, you know, the word Dark Shadows goes in front of it. But
right.
So we know it's coming, and then that's half the fun, is everybody being like, Barnabas isn't here. What do we do? Oh my gosh, wasn't it? I don't. But sorry,
No, you're fine.
that's my two thoughts, and I keep coming back to them. I was hoping I could find a third.
No, you're fine, man. I ask kooky questions on
I mean, I think it's one of those. I'm like, I feel like Dark Shadows didn't invent the wheel. Dark Shadows just found every last wheel and cobbled together a super wagon. And
right.
some of the wheels fell apart as it went, but you had enough other wheels that were working for the most part that we got there in the end. We had a fun journey on the way. We had some moments where, you know, we were down to one or two wheels, and, you know, the last second Leviathan episode where they just were like, oh, we're just going to quickly put in, you know, we're going to get out the NASCAR crew to at least swap some of these wheels out. But I don't think Dark Shadows needs to think of a more imaginative way to bring back Barnabas than that. I don't think we need to, oh, well, Barnabas changed, you know, Barnabas is wearing all these prosthetics in order that the family doesn't think it's weird he's still around, you know, 50 years later. But I mean, maybe give that to Quentin. That can be Quentin's bit.
I think that's another way too. To me, you do need to have a plan of, like, Barnabas was always going to be brought back.
Yeah.
Where Quentin himself, for me, would be the one who's watching the Collins family without them knowing. And he's sort of watching them through the lens of his own camera. He's a private photographer who works for himself.
Mm-hmm.
He's living under this name of Marcus Graham. And he's watching the kids, and he sees something happen that he knows, oh, shit, like, that's not good. But
we've got a Leviathan rumbling. Angelique's come back and married the heir again.
Right, something that he knows he has to go get Barnabas back.
It's Laura's burning year.
Right, and I think he goes to his studio, and here's this pirate ship painting. He removes it from the wall, opens the safe, and there is the vile blood marked B. Collins. And the thing of it is, if Barnabas is dead, I would have where Stokes and Julia and Quentin, they didn't bury him under his name. They buried him under another name, so no one knew. And other than Quentin. And then he goes.
Now, sorry,
No.
With the naming, would you, like, have fun with the naming of it? Like, would you name him, you know, we buried him under Jonathan Frid, and or would that be too on the nose? Would you name him after another, you know, we buried him under Harry Johnson because no one liked Harry Johnson. No one's ever going to look it up again. Like, anyways, sorry, that's me.
I think the name I had put on Facebook,
Dan Curtis,
was Landis Curtis, I think is what I had put.
Oh, perfect.
So
you're smarter than me.
No,
you figured it out, and you weren't completely that obvious, but enough that we'd all be like, okay, yep. He did his homework, and he had fun with it.
I'm crazy myself.
No, you're having fun with it, and you know, it's a little bit more thought out. Where it's like, okay, it's not, the nose is there. It's just got a nice face around it.
And he goes to the crypt, and he doesn't want to do it, but he knows he has to, right? So he pops the coffin open, pops the vial of blood. We need you, old man. We need you now more than we've ever needed you. And he dumps the blood on the mouth. You see the skin regenerate as you see the onyx ring.
Yeah.
And that's Barnabas is back. That's, to me,
I like it.
I think
that is the preview right there, is we need you, old man, and
the
vial and the you know, the ring and the hands healing up.
Right. I think that no matter how they bring him back in this new series, they have to find their way of not just doing it, but how Barnabas is fitting into their story and how they're covering their own tracks of bringing him back. And what because I don't think you're going to the door and go, oh, hey, I'm your cousin from England.
No. Nowadays, we all have phones. We'd all be Googling that.
Right,
We'd be,
right.
let's pull up some ancestry DNA here. We're going to do DNA testing. We got a kit in the backyard. We've got a whole closet of these kits because we get all sorts of kooks up here.
Yep. Yep.
I mean, and that would suck, when later on Nicholas Blair shows up as, Angelique's brother. Wonder how, warlock and or demonic DNA works out on those kits.
I always hope, like, if they ever get another Shadow movie off the ground, and they do like an older Margot Lane, like if it's the Shadow set in the future where it's like 2021, and like the agents of the Shadow gathering, and we see an older Margot Lane.
Yeah.
I'm always hopeful they'll cast Laura Parker as Margot Lane. The thing of it is, she was not a creation of Walter B. Gibson. She wasn't created for the pulps. Margot Lane was actually created for the radio dramas.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what some people might get misconstrued, that Lane was an original creation of the pulps. No, she wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I would love to see Laura Parker as a older Margot Lane.
Yeah.
Sort of, they're waiting around for the Shadow to return, and then hear that Venom, the laugh, and they don't see him. Like, oh shit! Like he's come back to take care of criminals.
But I love what you said about kind of bringing together the radio drama Shadow with
Right.
kind of the comic books. And I mean, I know Big Finish is the king of this, of just like, especially Cody Shell, just some of like he's pulled in like the Marilyn Ross like references at times, and it's just like, and it's stuff I'm like, I only know this because Catherine Lee Scott redid the audiobooks, and I was like, oh, that's the Cody reference. I could tell it was something. This is like, this is so stupid. I'm never gonna figure it out. And it's like, oh, that's why I'll never figure it out, and that's why it was so stupid. Although I like the Marilyn Ross novels, but it is a wild Collins house, not Collinwood, Collins house. He just banged those out so rapidly, and if you put a shotgun to me and made me do it, mine would not be half as nice as those stories. But it's a very different Collins house, and
Yep.
the books don't have to link up to each other. It's like, yeah, it's fine.
Yeah. If they could get maybe Alec Baldwin, who did the Shadow in the movie, in the '90s movie, to sort of do the Shadow on Big Finish, I wouldn't mind that.
There you go.
Because he could do the voice, he did the laugh, he did it all.
Yeah.
And I thought he did it. He played a great Shadow. He played a really hell of a good Lamont Cranston. But I think that's the thing. It's all about, does somebody want to do it correctly, and do it right. And I think that's every franchise in a nutshell. Like,
and it's hard. Like they did the Dracula movie because they were hoping to do the Universal monster kind of multiverse, and unfortunately that didn't play out. And it happens, People wonder if that was the hope with Tim Burton and Johnny Depp, and you have Julia in that last bit with her big eye. You've got a new love triangle with Julia and Josette and Barnabas, and they're all vampires at the end of the film. But at the same time, oh, well, it's just a soap opera, and that's just what we do. It's like, oh, okay. Okay. Well, it's kind of an answer. That's also kind of you're not doing this, but also we've never filmed, you never filmed another soap opera movie inspired by a soap opera. So we won't know if that's a Burton thing.
I think they were too busy phoning the 2012 movie in.
I mean, somebody had to figure out the whole puking jokes, There's just stuff like that in there where I'm like, I know I see the gag and I want to laugh at the gag, but it just doesn't work.
No.
And I don't know why, because I actively want to have fun and enjoy these films.
Do you think Big Finish will do anything else with Dark Shadows?
I hope so. I every so often on my Twitter will poke at them and be like, "Hello, anyone home at Wincliffe? You like I understand that was supposed to come out in like April 2020.
Right.
So, and of course, they've always I mean, the blessing and curse with Big Finish is it has since day one in Dark Shadows always been wonky with their timelines. But this was the one that I felt like they really had finally gotten all the pistons were finally lined up, and maybe it wasn't going to be released right away in April, but like we'd get it sooner or later. And then we had our COVID-19 moment, and it's been hard, but they've been filming others, recording other stuff in the meantime. And
Right.
nowadays we've all gotten used to getting our own technology in our houses to record and things. So,
Yeah.
I mean, they did the Tiger King reunion episode. They just shipped them all iPhones and, headsets. And we're like, there you go. Have fun.
Is there anything you want to add before we go?
No, just again, it's like, have fun with the films.
Yeah.
They're each wild in different ways. They are and they aren't Dark Shadow, the Dark Shadows TV show.
Right.
And it's awesome when people enjoy them. It's understandable that not everyone's going to love all the same things and not everyone's going to hate the same things. And we all can try better on Twitter sometimes, myself included.
Right. Listen, we all have our moments, is what we'll say.
Yeah. Yeah.
But for Dark Shadows Twitter, Scott, thank you so much, man, for coming on here, and I'm sorry for the technical
We
difficulties.
got through it. It's very dark shadows here. The set was on fire. We plowed through it. Some camera crew members walked through the scene. We've definitely flubbed our lines along the way, but we misspoke. But we got there in the end. We had our ancestors and ancestors and everything in between.
But thank you so much for taking the time to come on with me, man. I really appreciate it. I'm gonna have to bring you back on again because I love bringing people on and having fun with them and talking Dark Shadows. But go follow Scott at Dark Shadows Episodic on Twitter. He's a really, really cool dude, really cool guest, and thank you so much, man.
No, thank you, Joel. And if somehow you're listening to this and you're not following Joel, then I don't know what you're doing. Go follow him. He's got some awesome stuff too. I'm always resharing his things as well. Yeah, and other Dark Shadows people that are out there, I'm sure you can do a better job of this in your own way than I can. So please jump on. I'd love to listen to a couple more people with some awesome new thoughts
Right,
on all this.
right.
Um,
That's sort of the thing. Like I'm always asking, hey, how? Like that's something when I put on my Facebook and on Twitter, how would you bring Barnabas back? I want to know,
yeah,
right?
and people might have some fabulous ideas. For
Right,
a lot, especially like the three or four people that are always talking Dark Shadows. It's like it's great, but it's hard for us all not to come to the
right,
same idea. And it's like maybe someone out there who's just completely left field being like, I think Barnabas should come back as an alien from outside outer space. And it's like, whoa,
right,
I want to hear that now. Come on. I'll
right.
start thinking it up, everyone. But
Right.
yeah, come on.
That,
Lord knows we have enough people with some awesome ideas about Dark Shadows that could say all sorts of great stuff and talk with you, Joel. It's always been fun.
this channel is an open door policy to any fan who wants to come on. But thank you so much, Scott, and God bless, man.
All right. Good luck with things. Bye.
Bye.